Welcome to this candidate interview for the 2020 GSA elections. The GSA is the primary representative body for postgraduate students at the University of York and is run by students for students. Joining me for this interview is Andrew, who's running for the role of president.
Hello there.
Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself and say why you are running?
Okay, so my name is Andrew, and I've been a student at York for 4 years now. I started my undergrad here and I've gone on to do my postgrad here. I really like York, and I'm hoping to become president because I've had a lot of experience here as a student, and I think there are things that I can help the GSA improve that will allow the GSA to help all postgrad students have a fantastic time here, such as I have. Particularly one of those things, I think, is that the sense of community that I really want to focus on. The GSA is supposed to be here for all postgrad students, and I think it should be a rallying point around which we can build a postgrad community. I believe in inclusion rather than exclusion, and I want postgrads to feel as if the GSA really does represent them by bringing their ideas into the GSA and allowing us to speak for postgrad students to allow their voices to be heard.
Thank you. So to start with, what do you think is the biggest issue facing postgraduate students at York, and how do you intend to combat it?
This is an interesting one. I think, because I had a little think about this, I think it's uncertainty at the moment, which I know is not necessarily narrowing it down to one issue, but it covers a lot of really essential issues. In times like these, uncertainty is kind of king. And it's not the nice kind of uncertainty of, oh, what present am I going to find underneath the Christmas tree? It's more a lurking, deep uncertainty of, oh, my dissertation deadline is going to change. How do I catch up with research that I might have missed because I haven't been able to do it due to the pandemic? What about teaching that I've missed from the strikes? Now that the library's closed, will I be able to access the resources that I need for writing essays? That kind of stuff. There are lots of questions going around, and not all of these questions are getting answers. So I think that what we need to do as a GSA is we need to have our ear to the ground to bring students in, to listen to what their questions are and try and provide answers to those questions and solutions to the issues that they're facing, and not just one kind of cover-all solutions that attempt to address all postgrads with one wide brush, because a lot of different postgrad groups have a lot of different needs, but listening to individual postgrad groups and making solutions that are catered to these situations they're facing to make sure that no one is left out by the responses that the GSA is putting out.
Thank you. Now, the uncertainty that we have around a lot of issues at the moment, the GSA doesn't necessarily have the power to solve those particular issues. That lies, in some cases, in the gift of the university, in some cases at higher levels than that. So I'm just wondering, what specific things should the university be doing right now to try and tackle some of the issues and in doing so, remove some of that uncertainty?
I think that some of the emails that have been coming out from the Vice Chancellor have been helpful, but a lot of the time they are focused on very narrow points week by week, which means that we get fragments of information, but not necessarily the whole picture. So one week we'll be talking about accommodation. The next week we'll get some stuff through from some departments about what's going on with your course. I think that there needs to be a unified point under which this information goes, and that the information is broken down into kind of digestible chunks, to make it as easy for people to access as possible, because you're not always necessarily thinking about the whole situation all the time. You need to be able to access different parts of it. So rather than just trawling through your emails to try and find which email relates to the thing that you're thinking about now, all the information should be collated on a site or something like that. So you can go and you can go, okay, so I want to know about what's happening with my deadlines. Right, click through here, find something about your deadlines. Here's your department's policy on it. I think something like that could be really, really useful.
Thank you. So moving on, what experience do you have that would help you in the role as GSA president?
So if we kind of go way back, in first year, I started kind of developing skills for this. I was a kind of hall rep. So I worked to represent students in my accommodation block towards Derwent, where I was, and the Derwent College, which meant, a very base level picking up on very small kind of menial things of, oh, the pathway outside's like covered in mud and we don't like walking that way, or this is what we like. There are people being noisy at these times. That kind of basic stuff up to more serious stuff on, we are trained on how to pick up on people who are kind of lonely or worried or suffering from mental health issues and how to support them in those roles. And then in third year, I was also a course rep. So I developed more skills on how to communicate student concerns with departments at that level, and gained a greater understanding of what departments can and can't do and the workings of the university, and how best to frame student problems to the departments to get the solutions that we're looking for. It's all very good just complaining that we don't like something, but it's often helpful if you come with the, we don't like this and we would like this, which is something that I really hope to be bringing into my role as kind of GSA president, working with students to not just find what their concerns are, but find what their ideal solutions would be.
How do you intend to engage with students and represent them effectively?
So this is something that I addressed in my accessibility policy to the GSA. I think that there is room to open the GSA up more to student input, opening up communication channels both ways. So students know what we're doing and we know what students want from us. One of the policies that I've suggested is a kind of a roundtable. So a meeting setting that is open to all students as well as certain student reps to represent groups of students to come and discuss with us what the GSA is doing, what students' issues they're facing, and how we would transform that into policy that would be able to be enacted. So we have an open discussion forum so we can talk these ideas round with different groups of students and elected members, officials of the GSA, and come to solutions that work for everyone there.
Thank you. Now, in terms of the development of the university, a lot of the big decisions relate to estate developments. How will you ensure that the needs of postgraduate students are included in those decisions?
So obviously the first thing we would need to do is make sure that we are included in relevant meetings about this, to make sure that we put our hands, we stand up and we say, hey, look, we're here. We have a stake in this and we really want this to be considered for postgrad students, so that you're not just focusing on undergrad students, so you're not missing us out. Secondly, we would need to once again kind of bring in grassroots kind of opinions from the students, ask what they like about their current accommodation, ask what they don't like, ask what they like about the situation of things on campus for postgrad students. How is living on campus compared to not living on campus? When with the estate development, what do they want from it? This is something that the university should be building for everyone, and we need to make sure that postgrad opinion is heard. So when we get to those meetings, we have an idea of what postgrads want, and we can speak that nice and loudly to the university and make sure that postgrad needs are gone across.
So just following up on that, you talk about making sure you know what postgrads want. What will you do to make sure that you understand the wants and the needs of postgraduate students?
So some of that can come through, as I mentioned earlier, stuff like the roundtables. We can set them up in such a way that there are special roundtables set up for, today we're going to be discussing this, so come along if you'd like to contribute. There's obviously always the policy submission forms and appointments that people can make with the GSA office. That's another way that postgrad students can get in touch with us. And obviously there are course reps and interest group representatives for postgrads that we can consult with to make sure that all different groups are being talked to and get their opinions across to us. The idea of postgrads as one big group is nice, but we do need to recognize that there are different interest groups within, and their opinions need to be recognized as well.
How will you develop a strong relationship with colleges?
So as I was in Derwent, I had a really nice experience at the start of this year with not working with really, but just attending postgrad Derwent meetups. And I think that that is a place where the GSA could show more presence and visibility. obviously not just in Derwent, in all the colleges where postgrads happen to be situated. But I think it would be really good to get GSA visibility at those kind of events, if not setting up more events in coordination with postgrad representatives from different colleges to make sure that we build these links between colleges and the GSA, and that we bring the kind of postgrad body closer into the GSA and build a community around the GSA. I think it would be really nice to have a more united postgrad community, because we do have our differences, but we are still all postgrad studying at York.
Do you think the college system as it exists works for postgraduates?
I think it could do, I think postgrads could do with a more united kind of hub. I don't think that means necessarily scrapping the college system for postgrads. I think that building the GSA up to be more of a meeting place, more of a hub for postgrads would be ideal to kind of get round some of the distancing effects that the colleges can have for postgrads.
Do you believe that the GSA Council and policy submission process are effective in their current forms? And if not, how would you seek to change them?
So I'm not entirely sure on the effectiveness, because I've obviously not had the chance to be on the inside of the GSA. So I don't know exactly, stuff like how many people have submitted policies and how far those policies got. But for the research that I have done on it, I find that the submission process and the description of it can be a little obtuse. So to improve that, I would like to streamline that down and have the opportunity to work with postgrads. Firstly, to say, hey, look, if you do have ideas, you can use this to propose policy. And secondly, to work with them to actually transform those kind of ideas that they have into workable policy. So use the kind of roundtable discussions and appointments with the GSA to take their ideas, work them into actual workable policy, and then put them submitted through, so they don't have this kind of bounce back effect of, no, it's been rejected for X reason, they go away and they go away and solve X, and then it bounces back again saying, okay, no, we can't do this because of Y. People need a wider understanding and a kind of what the GSA does and what its limits are and what its purview is, so that when people have policy ideas or just issues that they're facing, they know how they can best put that through to us, and we can make that into effective policy that works for them.
Thank you. Now, I've got one slightly different, more general question, and then we'll move on to questions related more specifically to the issues in your manifesto. And that one question is, what one thing would you change about the University of York, and why?
More ducks. No, but on a more serious note, I think that it is, I'm going to come back to it because it is something that I really do believe in, this kind of sense of community. I feel like a lot of the time it is very easy for you to make small groups of friends as a postgrad. You become friends with the people on your course and you become friends with the people that you're living with. And although that can work really, really well for some people, if you don't really gel necessarily with those people initially, it can leave you having quite small friendship groups or being quite lonely. And I think that there's lots of room for building a kind of postgrad community where we can all come together, meet different people, have different interests, open up people's eyes to different viewpoints, make lots of friends that you wouldn't have otherwise have made, and really come together as a postgrad community that works towards something for the all of us. That can be done through the measures that I've mentioned earlier, with including more people in the GSA, and it can also be done for, obviously when the time is right, opening up increased social events on a weekly basis, making sure that the sporting social events actually are kind of happening and have momentum behind them, not just kind of 3 or 4 people turning up and not really knowing what's going on. They do actually have a kind of community-driven aspect, hopefully through volunteers and stuff like that. But build up little groups that we can all, people can go into, meet new people, that kind of stuff.
Thank you. So moving on to some of the issues that you've highlighted in your manifesto. You mentioned that you would like to create a student accommodation advice network. What would that look like in practice?
So ideally, it would be I envisaged it as an online source that's moderated, but that can take advice from postgrad students on the way that they've spent their time at York accommodation-wise. and put that advice out there for future students and current students who might be looking at moving, stuff like that, to help them navigate the accommodation in York, because it can be quite tricky. And I feel that especially for international students or people that are coming to or renting in York for the first time, it's good to have a head start on what to expect. And so you know exactly what you're getting out of your accommodation, rather than buying or renting the first thing that seems about right and then regretting it later. So, you know, reviews from people on what it's like to live in student castle compared to living on campus. What are the best ways to look at kind of private renting sources? You know, what are the differences between them? If you've got a kind of foster family system, how would that work? Along with things to look out for in contracts if you're trying to look at early termination. You know, a lot of contracts in York run for a set period of time, and they could be quite difficult to get out of, as people have been finding more recently. A lot of people have been doing trawling through contracts, looking for subclauses and stuff like that to gain an understanding. And a lot of that has been shared, but I would like to make sure that that stays as kind of common information, that the hard work that people have done doesn't just go to waste. So I would like there to be this kind of online source of information for postgrads who want to know more about accommodation at York can go to and can find out, you know, any questions that they might have that otherwise would be difficult to get their hands on.
Do you think that is information that could or should be provided by the existing services, both in the university and in the students' unions?
I think it probably should be, but I haven't seen anything like it from the university. The idea being that if we can set up something as a basis from grassroots efforts that shows that it can work, maybe they can start to incorporate it into their own structures. But I am a firm believer in kind of the effectiveness of grassroots actions, that students know what's best for students. So I would like to see this as perhaps a starting point that can then be expanded upon. And if, you know, USU or the university would like to pick it up and make it more official, that would be fantastic, because these are issues, after all, that affect undergrads as well as postgrads. That would be great, but I think we can take the initiative and start it ourselves.
Thank you. Now, you also mentioned that you want to improve the GSA's events provision. What do you feel the strengths and weaknesses are of the current provision?
I think so. I have enjoyed a lot of GSA events. So I'd say its strengths are that a lot of the events that they do, especially the pub quiz and courtyard, are really good fun and a wonderful place for you to meet new kind of postgrad groups and hang out and spend your free time and relax, because postgrad courses are a bit stressful, as we all know. But I'd say the weaknesses are, to a certain extent, in some cases, a lack of coordination. I would like to see more done, particularly I've heard from on the sports side of things that there's been a lack of kind of coordination and setting up from the GSA. Some people feel like they're kind of underrun, if that makes sense, and that more can be done. Another aspect I would like to see is more GSA visibility at these kind of events. You know, these are run by the GSA and they can be really good. So, you know, own up to it. Show, you know, we are the GSA and these are things we're putting on. It can also be a really good opportunity for the GSA to show kind of visibility of itself. People to go, oh, okay, so you're the president, and, you know, have general talks with people about what they'd like to see, what they like, what they don't like, this kind of thing. Interactions with students should be at the forefront of socials between students, and I think between the GSA and students. I mean, there's lots of feedback I also heard on people's stuff on the way that kind of Freshers Week for postgrads was run. I think personally that the Freshers Fair was a little bit kind of underrun. The undergrads obviously have this huge Freshers Fair that everybody is welcome to go to, but the one that specifically catered for postgrads, you know, had a fraction of the societies there, when a lot of societies would have loved to be there. So I think there is room to expand on that kind of thing as well.
Thank you. How would you go about developing contingency plans for future disruption of studies, and what format would they take?
So obviously the events that have happened in recent times have been somewhat unprecedented in relation to COVID-19, and a little more precedented in relation to the strikes. strikes also took place during my second year, and there was a feeling that these would be coming back. So I feel like there need to be measures put in place, a contingency plan, as you said, to make sure that we have a kind of a playbook to go by so that we understand what happens for students in these cases, so that the questions that kind of the questions and the uncertainty is removed to a certain extent, that there is something we can go to and go, okay, look, here's the situation, here's how we handle it. This would require working with departments and the university in very close coordination to come out with a set of plans that would work for postgrad students in the case of further disruption studies. So a couple of examples would be, the provision of a safety net. Kind of what would that look like for the different levels of disruption in your studies? Where does the safety net lie? What are the different, because I understand the university has their own worries about providing safety nets, particularly for postgrad courses that are only 1 year or research ones. It's very difficult to have an idea of where that safety net should be. So I want to work with the GSA and in coordination with the uni and departments to make sure that we can work together, so we have an idea of where those safety nets should be, that we have an idea of how to refund students in the case of further strikes, and how it should affect different groups of students. Obviously, international fees are a lot higher, so it's fair for them to expect something more back from their missing out on studies, so it would be a cooperative process, and it would take a long time, but I do think we could kind of hash it out so that there is an idea of what to do going forwards in case of further disruption studies, that there is a plan. We're not just working on the fly.
Thank you. Now, how would you improve LGBTQ plus inclusivity on campus?
I think there should be a high level of visibility. I know a lot of good work is already being done, but I would like to see kind of more events and better supported events for LGBTQ plus groups. I think incorporating aspects into ongoing socials. So an idea off the top of my head would be something like the pub quiz that goes on weekly. You could have during kind of LGBTQ plus month, we could have special themed ones, stuff like that. Also, more support for LGBTQ plus students, making sure that the resources are available for them when they kind of need these resources, and that the support is there for the for the sad cases where they feel discriminated against, and the discrimination does occur against them. We need to make sure that we can support them in those cases as well. So we do need to just open up our kind of accessibility for them and their visibility within the postgrad group as well, because they are a wonderful, fantastic part of kind of this postgrad community, and they really do need to feel accepted.
Thank you. Now, I've got one final question, and then I'll give you a chance to conclude. So that question is, in one sentence, why should people vote for you?
So now more than ever, we are facing changes. The GSA needs to change in order to make sure that we can deal with these changes. I am the face of that change. Vote
Thank you very much. And well, that vote for me might have been a separate sentence, but the first part was certainly all right. So here's your chance to add anything else you want to about who you are, what you stand for, and what you want to achieve.
I think I've covered it. Well, I hope I've covered it fairly well in what was said. I want to be the face of the new GSA, and I want to make sure that postgrads are heard and our views are taken seriously, and that we get what we deserve as postgrad students. So there we are. I think that sums it up.
Andrew, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.